Today we're moving on to how to use acrylic paints, and you have two handouts. You have one which is the color wheel, and then the second handout is vocabulary. And your color wheel will be finished and look like this, and then when it's completed you will staple or tape or glue this onto a page in your sketchbook. And things that you're going to be learning are how to mix colors by using just the primaries, which are yellow, red, and blue. You'll be using acrylic bristle brushes, which are different than the watercolor brushes. They're a much stiffer, firmer type of bristle. And you're going to be learning how to control the brush and get edge control. So your shapes on the color wheel are going to have nice, crisp edges. The vocabulary sheet explains several of the terms that you're going to become familiar with. After having used watercolors, you are familiar with primary colors of red, blue, and yellow. Secondary colors are orange, green, and violet. And secondary colors will be the squares on your handout. And so there's the orange, the green, and the violet. Now, on this projected image, these colors look very much the same, but if you come and you actually pick this example up and have a closer look, you'll see that this is a red violet, violet, and a blue violet, and this neutral color that sits in the center is a brownish color in appearance. So again, it's a little tricky to see on this projected image. Tertiary colors are the ones that are in between the primary and the secondary. And they have names like yellow-green, yellow-orange, red-orange, blue-green. And on the color wheel, the tertiary colors will be in the triangles. And the goal is that each one of the colors in between the primaries look very different from each other. So here's the yellow-orange, orange, and red-orange. And you want to be careful that they don't all look the same. And the same thing here, there's the yellow-green, green, and blue-green. And again, if you look closely at the actual example, you're going to see the differences between these three. The neutral color you're going to get by mixing the primary colors. And then you're going to do another assignment directly in your sketchbook, which is using tints, shades, and tones of a color. Here's a piece that's in progress. So here's yellow-orange with white added into it, and that makes a tint. Here's the yellow-orange with gray added in, so that's a tone of the tertiary color yellow-orange. And here's the yellow-orange with black added in, and that makes a shade of the tertiary color yellow-orange. And the same thing is going on here. This is a tint of red-orange, a tone of red-orange, so it's gray with red-orange. And then over here is the shade of red-orange. Tint of yellow-green, a tone of yellow-green, and a shade of yellow-green. So that is assignment number 2. And you're going to simultaneously be working on the color wheel and assignment 2, and I'll explain why that is. So what you're going to have at your area to start will be your handout. And then at the sink, you'll have a large lid. And you're going to begin with a small pool of yellow and a little smaller pool of red. And you're going to keep them apart from each other. You'll also need a container of water. And with acrylic paints, you only need to have one container of water, because you're not adding water into the paint the way you did with watercolor. The water is just for cleaning the brush. And you'll need a pad of paper towels. Things to know about acrylic: they're a water-based paint like watercolor, but as the name sounds, they're a plastic base. So if this gets into your clothing, you need to wash it out immediately, because when it dries hard. The same thing is true with the brush. You never want to, if you're using more than one brush, have your paint in your brush and then let it sit for a while, because this is a guaranteed way for damaging the bristles of the brush. Once acrylic dries into a brush, you can't wash it out, even if you use the brush cleaner. So I'm going to begin with my primary color of yellow. And I might need to do a couple layers, because this particular brand of acrylic paint is a little transparent and a bit on the thin side. So I'm going to just put this one layer down and we'll see. Now, to get a nice round edge, if you watch how I'm getting just the bristles of the brush running along the edge of the circle, and I'm actually turning my paper, and I'm keeping my hand resting on the table surface, so there's no movement of my hand, and that stabilizes the brush, and it helps me to get the edge control that I'm looking for. And I'm just turning the paper around, and the only thing that's touching the edge of the circle is this little square corner of the brush. And then the flat part of the bristles is touching the center area and filling that with color. So I've got my yellow completed. Now, I'm going to go next to my tertiary color of yellow-orange. And what I will do is take a little bit and pull this into the center. I rotate my brush to get the paint off of it. Now, notice how little red it's going to take to change that. I'm just going to tap that corner into the red. Can you see that amount? It's very little. And I'm going to actually remove some of it. That's going to change my yellow immediately. Can you see that? Yep, it's actually probably darker than I want it to be. That might be closer to the orange color. So what I will do is mix this, rotate off the brush, and I'm going to pull some yellow from the far end, because I don't want to get a lot of the red into my yellow pigment. I want to keep the yellow as clean as possible. And I'm going to pull this over. I'm going to still pull a little bit more. It's amazing how very little red it takes to change the yellow. And a little bit more yellow. And I will go ahead and use this as my next color, which is the tertiary. And if you notice again how I'm mixing this, I keep pulling the brush, dragging it across the palette into the center, and I rotate the paint off, and I sort of keep moving it into the center. You want to mix the paint really well so you don't see any streaks of red showing through. It should be a real clear color. And now I'll go to my triangle next to the yellow. And here again, I'm going to keep my hand steady, firmly planted, so just the tip of the brush is gliding across, and I'm using this straight edge of the bristles to get a straight edge and get the corner right into the corner of the triangle. Rotate the paper as opposed to moving my hand around. Get the corner of the bristles into the corner of the triangle and rotate the paper. And I've got nice straight edge control. And you can kind of tell that that's looking a little different from the yellow. And again, on the actual example, it looks more strongly. You can see it also appears quite a bit darker on the palette. So by adding an additional layer, and the acrylic can dry pretty quickly, or I can use the hair dryer on it, just like with watercolor. If I add an additional layer, that's going to help darken the appearance on the color wheel and get me something that looks quite a bit different than the yellow. If I go outside, if the control of the brush is a challenge and I go outside of my shape, I can touch it up afterwards with white paint or white out and come from the other area. Okay, so I have my yellow-orange. I've got quite a bit still on my palette, so I'm just going to, again, touch just the corner of the brush into the red and bring it over and mix that in. And what I'm going for is my orange. And again, I want it to look quite a bit different from the yellow-orange. But I want to make sure that it's not going to look like red-orange. I think I'll go ahead and use that. Looks pretty well mixed. Rotating that brush really helps mix it. This is my secondary color, so I want it to go into the square shape here. And again, my hand is steady, pulls and glides the edge of the brush right into the corner. Rotate the paper, slide the bristles along the edge, get a straight edge, go up to the corner, rotate the paper, and continue that process. Oops. It didn't get on my handout. And I want that to look quite a bit different. It looks quite a bit different on the palette, so an additional layer will help that. Using the hairdryer right now would be a good thing because I'm trying to add a second layer on paint that's a little bit tacky, and what will sometimes happen is it will remove the paint as opposed to adding a second layer. And I don't want that to happen. But I do want it to look different than the yellow-orange, and I think this is helping. Okay. Again, another additional layer is going to give a much smoother appearance, and you can kind of go back and do that. Now I want to change this and make it red-orange. I'm pretty much out of paint here, so I'm going to pull a little bit yellow over here again, taking it from the edge as opposed to the center because I'm going to use more of this yellow paint for assignment number 2 in a moment. And rotate that around. And now I want to make sure that my red-orange looks different from the red. And again, looks different from the orange. I think I might have it. And the red-orange, again, is a tertiary color. It's a mixture of a primary and a secondary. And the tertiary is going to go into this triangular shape. If you struggle with getting into the corners of the triangle, you can try using the detail brush, which might be easier. But again, I keep my hand planted right on the tabletop. If you switch brushes like this one should go into the container of water. I'm going to just put the detail brush in the water right now. And my last color is going to be the red primary, which will go into the circle shape. And because my brush has the slightest amount of yellow, I need to give it a good washing. At my area, I currently have a clear container of water. And I'm going to clean the bristles off and use the paper towel as a guide to make sure that I don't have any other pigment in here. That looks like pretty solid coverage. Got a lot of paint on here. Wipe as much off as I can. Swish it around a lot in my water. Use the paper towels to clean off that excess. It wouldn't be a bad idea to go to the sink and use the brush cleaner, but I don't want to do that while I'm recording this. So check and make sure that everything's out. Use my fingers to help figure that out. And now I'm going to make my primary in this circle shape. Be careful when you wash your brush out that your bristles don't have a lot of water left over, because you don't want to add water to the pigment, because your pigment's already pretty thin and transparent because of this type of paint that we're using. So you want your brush to be quite dry after you've washed it. And again, I'm rotating the paper, and the only thing that's touching the edge is the corner of this brush. Okay, so I've got that section done. Now I have a fair amount of paint left on my palette, and rather than let this go to waste, I'm going to begin assignment number 2 in my sketchbook, and I'm going to show you that in a moment.